Hello?
Hello?
Who is this?
Who is this?
It's Mr. Bangers.
Do you like scary movies?
Oh yeah, I love them. In fact, I run a podcast where we talk about them all the time.
What's your favorite scary movie?
There's just so many to choose. I mean, how can you just pick one? You got classic era horror, and Italian, 80s, modern. There's just so much to pick. The horror genre is an expansive thing.
Modern.
Oh, well, my favorite modern horror film from the last decade or so is definitely Lucky McKee's May, because I feel like that's just a great, personal, powerful film.
Yeah, no one cares. Classic.
Well, I mean, classic, that's a hard one, too, because the classics can be divided up into their own sections, because you got 30s and the 40s and 50s. I mean, when does the classic era end? The 60s, 70s? Come on. I guess if I had to pick one, probably, maybe Bride of Frankenstein. That's a real good one, don't you think?
I think I'm gonna hang up now.
Don't you fucking hang up on me! I'll get you like a fish! I'm so alone. Hey, Mr. Mash, do you remember what we did on the last episode?
We did the Wes Craven episode.
We did talk about Wes Craven, but we left out a series of films he directed.
He only directed one of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. And we already talked about those.
We're not talking about Nightmare on Elm Street. We're talking about the other horror franchise.
The Hills Have Eyes 1 and 2? Oh, wait, we talked about that.
No, the other Wes Craven horror franchise.
Oh, you're talking about the My Little Pony series.
As far as I know, he's not involved with that.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I think the answer is so obvious that you might just scream.
That movie Stab.
How many Stab movies are there now? 8, I think?
I think there are a total of 8.
Alright, enough fucking around. We're talking about Scream today, man. We're talking about the Scream Tetralogy.
I thought it was a quadrilogy.
That's a made-up fucking word. The real phrase for a series of 4 entities is a tetralogy.
You guys can't see it right now, but there's a big neon sign with a finger pointing at Mr. Bangers here that says nerd, and it keeps flashing.
That sign is on at all times. Do you remember what horror was like in the early 90s?
It was better than the horror that was in the millennium.
No, that's the incorrect answer. The correct answer, there wasn't a lot of horror in the early 90s. It was dead period for the genre.
Not necessarily. Full Moon released a lot of stuff in the 90s.
Yeah, everything went direct to video. The point I'm making is, mainstream audience was really tired of horror in the early 90s. Until around 1996, when a new film came that really revived interest in not only horror as a genre, but specifically the slasher film. And we're, of course, talking about 1996's Scream.
Someone is playing a deadly game. Someone who's seen one too many scary movies. Now, he's taken his love of fear one step too far. He didn't make the rules, he just kills by them.
What do you know about the production of this movie, JD?
What do you mean by production?
Who wrote it?
Kevin Williamson wrote it.
Kevin Williamson
And
wrote it.
Wes Craven directed.
A not really great time in Wes's career. He hadn't really had a huge hit in a while. And this film completely revived his career and made him a huge name again. For at least a brief time anyway, changed the horror genre completely. After Scream, there was this short-lived cycle of very slick studio slasher films that were low on gore, usually had no nudity, usually starred people from TV shows were on the time, a lot of which were on the WB. That was all because of Scream. Scream did these things first. What are your thoughts on the original Scream, Mr. Mash?
I think it's a pretty decently strong slasher film. It does have its weak moments, but every slasher film at some point in time makes you wonder, why am I watching this movie?
What do you think is the most famous scene in this film?
The one that copied and made fun of the most is the opening scene with Drew Barrymore,
Yes.
where the boyfriend gets gutted.
Phone ringing, do you like scary movies?
Do you like scary movies and stuff?
That was a catchphrase there for a long time because of this film. That opening moment is very famous, and rightfully so, because it's actually the best scene in the movie.
Yeah.
Rewatching it for the purpose of the show, it really reminded me of of the babysitter urban legend. She's not a babysitter and there are no kids, but receiving these mysterious, threatening phone
The
calls.
call is coming from inside the house.
Yeah, the killer is already there. What do you think of Drew Barrymore as a scream queen?
She has a set of lungs in this movie.
She does, and she does this opening bit very well. Now, an interesting factoid is that Drew Barrymore was originally offered the part of Sydney, and she passed on that in favor of the opening character because she thought it would throw audiences off, and it probably did. It's a really well done scene. The camera, the way it navigates around the house and around Drew's character, really does suggest another presence, another person. Lots of shots of the house from the distance, which really emphasizes her isolation. That great little bit where she puts the popcorn on the oven. And by the way, can you even buy popcorn like that anymore?
I've seen it in places. I think Kmart still sells it.
That crackling really does help build tension. She realizes that she's being watched. And when that happens, there's a slow zoom on her face, and Drew Barrymore has these very wide, expressive eyes.
My favorite line in the movie. You've heard me quote it over and over and over again.
We quoted it already in this episode.
If you hang up on me, I'll gut you like a fish! With that one line, they really actually, in my opinion, really set up the tone of where this movie is going. By the way, weak choice in favorite scary movie. They could have dug a little deeper than Halloween.
They could have. Quizzing her on horror trivia is a pretty well-known aspect of this movie, but it really only happens in this first movie, in this first scene.
It happens in part 4.
That's true, it does happen in part 4. Really clever moment where she's on the phone talking with this lunatic, cornered against the wall and the television. Nice visual representation of what's happening to her at the moment. The boyfriend doesn't make it.
No, he guts him like a fish. Drew Barrymore didn't pay attention to her horror movies when she was watching them.
That's right.
Everybody knows that Mrs. Voorhees was the original killer in the Friday the 13th series.
Anybody listening to this podcast knows, but I don't know if everybody knows.
So if you're going to make the declaration, I've seen that movie 1,000 goddamn times, then you should probably know that Mrs. Voorhees is the actual killer, not Jason.
Well, her boyfriend paid for her impertinence, now didn't he?
Yes, so the moral of the story is, kids, pay attention to your horror movies, because they can save you or your boyfriend's life.
Exactly. So you want to talk about Drew's death?
Pretty cool.
Repeatedly stabbed and then strung up from a tree, just as her parents are coming home. The movies that followed in Scream's wake, hardcore horror fans were very critical of the time, and remain pretty critical today, of their lack of gore. Things like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legends, etc. But this first Scream movie doesn't really back down on the gore any. By 1996 standards, it's pretty gory.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think of the visual presentation of Ghostface as a villain?
Pretty creepy. Face is emotionless. It's abstract.
Like the big shoes on a clown, exaggerating the human figure into something absurd and grotesque.
Yeah, so it's abstract. Like I said.
Ghostface, or Father Death, as he's actually referred to in this movie if you pay close enough attention. He's part of the long line of horror villains that have a dark body and a white, expressionless face. A lot of horror scholars read into that, you can't see the face, you can't see the expression, it dehumanizes them, it makes them the other, the outsider. Think of that what you will, but he certainly fits in with the other slashers. Ghostface was accepted pretty much immediately into that pantheon of horror icons.
There's more to it than just the mask. The whole costume dehumanizes him.
But something else to note about Ghostface is that it's just a Halloween costume. Before this movie, it was a real Halloween costume you could buy in any number of stores all over the country.
I maintain that you cannot buy that costume.
That is a deliberate comment on how horror killers frequently have these elaborate costumes. Ghostface, it's just a dude in a Halloween costume. He's a normal guy, as you see, because in this movie he gets his ass beaten by young women repeatedly. It's another thing to talk about, because Scream brought the self-aware horror film to the masses. Other movies had done it before, but Scream is what popularized this concept of characters in a horror movie who are aware of the cliches and rules of the horror genre.
There's that really famous scene where Randy, the big rules of a horror movie.
What are those rules, JD?
No drugs or booze. No sex.
Boo goes the people in the room.
Big no-no.
And then what's the third rule?
Never say, I'll be right back.
Because you won't be.
Because you won't be.
Is that the second most famous scene in this movie?
Probably.
Yeah, the first scene of Drew Barrymore saying, the first Nightmare on Elm Street was good, but all the sequels sucked, which I think might be Wes Craven speaking for himself there. Sydney is on the phone talking about, you mean the movies where the girls always run upstairs instead of walking out the door, or something like that. They literally flat out mentioned by name The Town That Turned at Sundown, Evil Dead, Hellraiser, Prom Night. We talked about that scene where Randy explains the rules, which is very famous, but something I think people tend to overlook is the scene directly after that, where Gail and her newsmen are in the van watching what's happening in the house on a live feed, and Gail says, "This is boring." Is it giving Kevin Williamson too much credit to say that he is directly commenting on the general public's disinterest and boredom with the conventions of the horror genre, or am I just giving him too much credit there?
I think you're giving him too much credit.
I picked up on that. Henry Winkler plays the high school principal, playing the opposite of the Fonz.
He calls kids little shits.
Instead of being the coolest guy in school, he's this total asshat principal. Wes not only has a cameo in the movie, but he has a cameo in a Freddy Krueger sweater.
And he's called Fred.
Yeah, his character is named Fred. He's the school janitor. At the beginning of the movie, like all good final girls, Sydney is a virgin. But she does give it up in the course of the film to her boyfriend. And how does he convince her to have sex with him?
I can't remember.
By saying, life is like a movie.
Oh, yeah.
This scene is intercut with the people in the living room watching Halloween. Right at the scene where PJ Souls stands up and the blanket comes down and you see her boobs, we cut away to Nancy and Billy in the bedroom just as she's taking her bra off. However, the movie deliberately denies the audience the cheap thrills of seeing some girl's titties.
They were Nev Campbell's anyway.
At the end there, after the killers have revealed themselves, and Sydney gets a hold of the voice changer and is calling them and mocking them.
Since we talk about it every time we talk about a Wes Craven movie, are there any self-made booby traps?
No! Disappointingly, Wes hasn't really employed the booby trap.
Well, they're kind of in Scream 2.
A little bit. And I would argue that none of the Scream films really fit in with Wes Craven's themes. These films really do feel more like Kevin Williamson's creation. I think this is his baby, and Wes was strictly on a work-for-hire job that just happened to produce a massive hit for him.
There are some Wes Craven elements in it, too. Sydney's go-get-em attitude.
Strong female characters frequently appear in his film, as we discussed last time.
She fights back and fights back hard.
Yeah.
I mean, she stabbed Billy Loomis with a fucking umbrella. That's hardcore shit right there. Dropped a TV on Stu Macher.
Speaking
God, why do I know their names?
A reoccurring element in all of these movies is the killer coming back for one more scare.
That is severely making fun of the horror genre.
How many slasher movies really do it? There's a final scare in Friday the 13th, but it's not Mama Voorhees coming back.
Well, no, but in Friday the 13th 2 and 3, Jason comes through the window at the end.
Yeah, it's true.
Could it be, though, that Wes Craven was making fun of his own movie?
So it's not so much the killer coming back for one more scare, that's the cliche, as it is just the one big scare before the end credits. But that bothers me. It's annoying. It's a little annoying in the first movie. How much abuse can this kid take? When they do it in the sequels, it gets really annoying. What do you think of Sidney Prescott and, more specifically, of Nev Campbell's performance?
She's an interesting final girl. You'll probably disagree with me. But I feel like Nev Campbell and Rose McGowan should have switched. I think Nev Campbell's acting style would have been better suited for Tatum. I feel like Rose McGowan's a stronger actress.
I agree with that. I've never really thought Nev Campbell was all that interesting. Sydney, in this movie, she's still mourning the murder of her mother. She's in the house by herself because her father is always away on business trips. Wandering through the house by herself, she picks up a picture of her and her mother. And as she falls asleep, the camera cuts to outside the house and you see the sun setting. The movie ends with a shot of the sun rising, as if to say, a new day has begun. She's moved past this trauma of her mother's murder. Nev's okay. She conveys a proper sense of vulnerability, but I think she's a little flat. She doesn't earn that character development at the end. It's not something that arises naturally out of the character. But that's just, like, my opinion, man. Now, what do you think about the supporting cast, her friends, and...
You already know how I feel about Rose McGowan.
Even though there's no actual nudity in this film, Rose McGowan still provides some pretty blatant eye candy.
At ass.
Would any school dress code really allow her to wear those things? Maybe in California. Very short skirt on and a very tight sweater.
When she wears the skirt, she wears tights.
I don't remember any tights, but then again, I might not have been paying attention. And then later on, she wears a pair of very tight red pants and a sports jersey that's cut off and exposes her midriff. Now, I know that shit ain't cool in public schools.
Yeah, no, that shit ain't cool. It's hot, but it ain't cool.
McGowan is pretty likable. She's a decent friend. She gets a lot of the best dialogue in the movie.
I'll send you a copy. Bam! Bitch went down.
What do you think of Matthew Lillard, or Stu Macher, as you informed us? He's incredibly annoying.
He's incredibly annoying. You want to talk about Sydney not earning her character development.
Why is he a killer? Billy has the motivation of revenging his parents' breakup. Stu seems to be in it for the hell of it.
I still feel like it came out of nowhere. That may be intentional.
I just think it's underwritten.
Well, the first time you saw the movie there, did you watch this and be like, man, there's two killers?
In 1996, to a uninitiated audience, that would have been a surprise. The traditional rule is one killer. I'm sure that was an intentional subversion of the rules. Now, what about Jamie Kennedy's Randy? What do you think of him as a character?
He's a much better person in the movie than he is in real life.
Randy is a character, in theory, that I should like, because he's the resident movie nerd. Kennedy plays it a little too loud for my taste. He's kind of obnoxious and annoying, and that's a general problem I have with a lot of the characters in the film. Is Gail Weathers supposed to be likable in this first film?
I don't think she is supposed to be likable. I think she's supposed to have a redeeming character storyline.
The thing that humanizes her is her romance with Dewey. David Arquette gets a lot of shit as being annoying and terrible, but he's honestly one of the best things about this movie.
He's one of the best things about the whole series.
I like Deputy Dewey, and I like David Arquette. It really is no surprise that Arquette and Courtney Cox would get married because their chemistry is very real.
Feels legit when you're watching them.
The scene where she's in front of the high school talking to him and says, "You look awfully young to be a police officer." He says something like, "I'm 25."
And she goes, "Oh, looks like I just missed you."
And he is actually a huge fan and has always had a crush on her. Dewey's really the only supporting character I like because even though he has a romance with Gail, she's still kind of obnoxious. Billy Loomis, Skeet Ulrich, how the fuck do you say that first name? Skeet Ulrich is weird. From the beginning, he comes off as weird dude, and even when he's trying to be charming, he still doesn't really come off as charming. At first, the movie plays with that because he's set up as a deliberate red herring. The movie does that double meta subversion. He's been killed. No, he hasn't. My biggest problem with Billy Loomis as a character is not that. After he's been let out of jail and he's talking to Nev, basically says, "You need to get over this thing with your mom." Okay, dick move. Would you walk up to somebody who's grieving and say, "You need to get over it"? Maybe that's realistic behavior for a teenage boy, because teenage boys are notoriously selfish and narrow-minded, but that doesn't make them likable.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't dislike that character move. It actually sets up a little bit more of his later on storyline in the film.
I guess if you read that conversation as foreshadowing for his motive, it works better. Despite that, the movie is effective as a thriller. Aside from the opening scene, I like the scene where Sidney is attacked in her home by Ghostface, and he gets the shit beat out of him in that scene, which is hilarious and effective.
Bash him in the face with the phone.
With the door. Anybody who has spent time in a big house by themselves alone at night might appreciate the tension that scene generates. The only moment where Sidney's pain feels real is when she's in the girls' bathroom, overhearing these two girls gossip. That leads into attack in the school bathroom, which is
she contemplates suicide, but she realizes the murder is so much more therapeutic. Seen it way too many times.
You've seen this movie way too many times. She's looking underneath of the stalls, shot of focusing on the jittery air vent. The bathroom sequence has always worked really well for me.
Pretty cool. It's a pretty effective scene.
The garage sequence is another standout. Great build-up. There's a shot of a flickering light in the hallway. Long, lingering shots in the hallway as if to suggest you're waiting for somebody to come through it. She opens the refrigerator and the cameras look from outside of the fridge. There's even, it's not quite a spring-loaded cat, but it might as well be. And I like that little conversation she has with the Ghostface killer. "Oh, please, Mr. Ghostface, don't kill me. I want to be in the sequel. You want to play Psycho Killer?" And he nods slowly, yes. What do you think of Death by Garage Door? How realistic is that?
I don't know if it's realistic, but it's definitely a cool death scene. It's something that hadn't been seen before.
Yes, it is completely impossible, but who cares?
Plus, it gives you one final look at the perfect apple shape of Rose McGowan's ass in 1996.
There's another good scene where Randy is sitting there watching Halloween. He's drunk, and he's saying to the characters on the TV, "Look behind you!" And, of course, behind him is Ghostface. 5-second delay. That pays off nicely.
Which is a great death scene.
Good throat slashing, yes. Very satisfying. What do you think of the score in this film?
I could take it or leave it.
I don't like it. Mark Beltrami has done some decent scores. I've always found his score for the Scream films very abrasive. Another thing these post-Scream slasher films are famous for are having big pop songs on the soundtrack. And this one does that a little bit. The best example is Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds' Red Right Hand. And in this film, it's used during the montage where everybody in Woodsboro is locking up at night. There have been a few murders and everybody's paranoid. Really great scene. What do you think about this movie's opinion on the relationship between real-life violence and violence in the media?
How about that, where Billy's like, horror movies don't make serial killers.
They make serial killers more creative.
I kind of agree with that.
Horror movies don't make serial killers, but they do make violence look cool. You can't deny that.
Same as video games and all that stuff.
Film seems to make its opinion very clear that movies are not responsible for making people crazy, but doesn't really delve into it very much, and I feel like that maybe could have strengthened the film. One of my problems with Scream, I don't know how much heart the movie has. It feels kind of shallow. You mentioned Stu gets killed when Sidney drops a TV on his head. Now, a serial killer obsessed with horror movies getting a TV dropped on his head, is Kevin Williamson that smart? Was he making some deliberate connection there, or was he just saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if..."
If you're a screenwriter, you would have enough ability to tell that's a kind of irony, even a low-level screenwriter like Kevin Williamson, connection that they would be able to make.
I like the Scream films, but I do feel like Williamson is a bit of a hack, and especially if you watch anything else he's done besides the Scream movies. There's a big difference between Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer. Maybe Wes Craven is that difference. Maybe it just takes a skilled director to elevate material that is on its surface not that impressive.
Hello?
Hello, Sydney. Remember me?
What do you want?
Don't you know history repeats itself?
Scream was an enormous hit. Like in Nightmare on Elm Street before, it was one of those movies that instantly entered the pop culture spectrum, became iconic immediately. Sequel to Scream was inevitable. A sequel even makes sense. What are slasher movies famous for besides lots of gore, lots of nudity, and stupid cliches?
Stupid sequels.
That's right. Sequel was gonna happen, as is usually the case with slasher movies. The next year, 1997, Scream 2. Usually those quickie sequels do not have the same director, writer, or cast, but this one does. The opening of Scream 2 takes the meta element even further because it introduces the concept of the Stab series, the series within the series.
I felt like that was an interesting touch.
You even get a brief glimpse of Stab. It recreates the opening of the first movie almost scene for scene, but everything's a little louder and a little dumber.
And Heather Graham plays the opening girl.
Yeah, she's playing the double fake meta Drew Barrymore. Did you know who directed the Stab sequences we see in this movie?
Who?
Robert Rodriguez.
I think I did know that.
Yeah. The opening scene is not actually about the Stab movie. It's about this black couple who go to the midnight premiere of it.
I thought it was going to be about race with you.
Rewatching the first Scream, a thought I had, there are no black people in this movie.
There aren't.
One of the news reporters is an older, matronly black woman, the kind of Oprah-esque black women that are acceptable in pop culture.
And isn't one of the kids in the background black?
There might be an extra. The first movie's cast is Lily White. Comments on that right out of the gate when you have Omar Epps and Jada Pinkett Smith going to see Stab. She says, how come there ain't no black people in these horror movies?
It goes into a great character conversation. Why can't we go see Sandra down the block? Sandra's not black. I need an all-black ticket for an all-black movie.
They get a free Ghostface costume.
Yeah, they get a free Ghostface costume, and Jada Pinkett Smith goes, and it's black.
I criticize Kevin Williamson's writing in the first movie, but in this movie, he's really good at making characters likable very quickly. You meet this couple immediately, and you don't really know anything about them, you immediately like them, because they have this rapport that's very funny.
When I first saw the movie, when he got the knife through the cheek, I didn't expect it.
So first off, if you are in a bathroom stall, and you hear some weird noise from the next stall, are you going to press your ear to the bathroom door to try and get a closer ear?
Probably not.
Probably not. Second question, if you are a serial killer standing on the other side of a bathroom stall and you're going to stab somebody on the other end, how do you know exactly where their head is? And how do you know by making noise that will cause them to put their ear to the wall?
I don't know. Because it looked cool.
Exactly, it looked cool. And nothing else, this opening is pretty cool. I think it might paint a negative portrait of the kind of people who enjoy horror movies, maybe a little too much. Why the movie's playing in the theater, you have people in the audience in costume yelling and screaming when double plus fake Drew Barrymore is getting attacked. Somebody in the audience says something like, "Kill the bitch!"
Right outside as Jada Pinkett Smith is
getting stabbed in the audience.
Yeah, back to this violence in the media thing.
Okay.
Do you feel like maybe Williamson had an inner conflict? This is a pretty clear conflict with that. She's getting stabbed and she goes up on the stage,
nobody goes to help her.
Nobody notices because they're watching the horror movie.
Well, they think it's part of the show.
And they think it's part of the show, according on how it desensitizes.
If you want to give Williamson a lot of credit, you could say that. You could say that he is criticizing the hardcore horror fans who go to midnight premieres and dress up. Maybe he's saying that this is a theater full of potential Bailey Loomises. If you want to give him credit, that could be true. If you don't want to give him any credit, you could just say he thought it was cool.
Give him a little bit of credit. That's heavily hinted upon.
I really like the opening to Scream 2. Is it as scary as the opening for the first Scream? No. But it is incredibly entertaining.
It's equally disturbing, though.
If you want to get into the implications of it, perhaps it is.
Strong emotional opening there.
Oh yeah, good stuff. Now, it's a year later. Sydney is moved on to college. What's the first thing that happens to her? She's laying in bed, and the phone rings. She answers the phone.
What's your favorite scary movie? Who is this? You tell me. Randy so-and-so.
From this place. The person on the other line goes, "Oh, shit," and hangs up. I don't know how prolific caller ID was in 1996 versus the next year, but at the time, caller ID was a big thing. It's another thing that roots the movie in 1996. In addition to the two characters at the beginning, really does double down on the people of color. Her roommate is a black person, and then Gail's new cameraman, who disappears before the last act. He gets the hell out of there.
Jada Pinkett and her boyfriend in the beginning of the movie were killed to make way for the two new black people, because you can't have 4 black people in a horror movie. That's nuts. Unless it's Leprechaun in the Hood.
Sydney has evolved as a character to a degree. Still seems kind of muted throughout a lot of the movie. At the end of the film, there's been a lot of murders around her, and she's lost her boyfriend. She seems cool about it.
That's a hard call to make. Her mother was killed. She went through all this shit with Billy Loomis. Maybe she's numb at that point.
Once again, if you want to give Kevin Williamson and Nev Campbell credit, that's what you would say.
Put that spin on it, the ending's better.
I'm still not really a Nev Campbell fan. However, Jamie Kennedy as Randy is much more likable in this film than he was in the first. He's balanced out the things that are likable about the character with the things things that are annoying about that character.
Slice and dice.
What the fuck was that?
That's one of his lines from one of the movies.
Okay. In the first movie, it's hinted at that he has a crush on Sid. This movie, they walk out of class together, they're talking. Jerry O'Connell, as Sydney's new boyfriend, walks up, they walk off. There's that little shot of Randy standing there by himself. Dude still can't get the girl. Gail and Dewey are both back. Gail starts out as the same bitch she always was. Sydney stalked her again. Gail wrote a book about the events of the first movie, and that's where the movie Stabbed comes from. It's based off the Woodsboro murders by Gail Weathers.
I'll send you a copy.
For unlike the first movie, she actually does have some character development here. At college, she renews this relationship with Dewey, and they get much closer in this film. They almost do it in this film.
Yeah, they do. And then he instantly gets stabbed in the scar tissue. Somehow saves his life.
Yeah, he's walking with a limp because he got stabbed at the end of the first movie.
And where's the limp in the third movie?
I guess it healed.
Actually, it's there.
She continues to have a strong chemistry with Arquette, and he is pissed off at her at first because of what she wrote about him in the book. He looks her in the eyes, and it's like he still immediately melts. Still has this huge crush on her that he...
David Arquette's probably the strongest actor in these films.
Perhaps. The end, when Gail runs over to be with Dewey as he's being loaded into the ambulance...
shows that she's grasping the idea that not everything needs to be...
about her, or about her story.
It doesn't need to be public.
Unlike Sydney's character development, the movie actually earns that. I really like that ending. You want to talk about some of the new characters?
There's Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Her role is pretty small. She's just victim number 3. I really like her character, even though it's a brief role. Her sequence is actually one of the scarier moments in the movie, and it's really the only part of the sorority subplot that amounts to anything.
This scene in the movie has another really famous line from the series. Do you want to die tonight, GZ?
Oh, that's true.
I am so
because there's a
nerdy.
Sarah Michelle Gellar is, or Cece, which is her name, thank you, is part of the sorority, and she's in the house by herself. Mirrors the Drew Barrymore scene in the beginning. You have that peering, voyeuristic camera returns. The way Ghostface gets into the house is maybe a little convoluted, but you're honestly enjoying it enough that you don't notice. How did he know she was going to open the door and walk outside and leave the door open and turn her back and allow him to sneak in?
Sarah Michelle Gellar is in peak hotness.
This was shot probably between Buffy season 1 and 2, or in the middle of season 1. She still looks good, and her death is great. Even though there's very little gore, it's still a very satisfying death.
She gets thrown off the balcony.
Oh, she gets stabbed in the back, and then she gets thrown off the balcony, and you don't see the splat, but you hear the splat.
Enough of a sound that you're like, yeah.
And of course,
she's not in Scream 3.
Unsurprisingly, Buffy does beat the shit out of Ghostface. For some reason, there is a bicycle at the top of the stairs, and she throws the bicycle at him, which is something Scary Movie would actually mock in a pretty clever way. But for the most part, a lot of the new characters are a little bland. Elise Neal plays Sydney's roommate. She doesn't really have a lot of development. I am on record as not really being a Jerry O'Connell fan. He's pretty disposable in this film. His big moment is when he sings I Think I Love You to Sydney.
I think I love you. So what am I so afraid of? I don't know the rest.
I didn't know you felt that way, JD. It's a cornball move, and I think the screenwriter thought it was a lot more charming than it actually is. Cotton Weary, who was mostly an off-screen character in the first movie, becomes a major character in this one, as played by Liev Schreiber. What do you think of his character arc?
He's
he's
a red herring.
He's definitely a red herring. We find out he did not commit the murder on Sydney's mom. There's still this antagonism between them, maybe rightfully so, since she did send the guy to prison, blatantly setting him up as potentially the killer. However, he's not, and actually he ends up saving the day at the end of this film. I'm a fan of Liev Schreiber, so it works.
Let's talk about the big killer reveal.
The killers in this movie.
Mickey. I don't know his last name. I'm not that nerdy.
Mickey, and who is revealed to be Mrs. Loomis. She has a different identity throughout most of the film.
Can I do it?
Can you do it? Can you pull it out of the hat?
Debbie Salt.
Debbie Salt, you fucking nerd. Mickey and Debbie Salt,
a.k.a. Billy's mother,
are played by very young Timothy Olyphant and Laurie Metcalf, a.k.a. Jackie from Roseanne.
A.k.a., for you newbies that don't know what Roseanne is, Sheldon's mother in Big Bang Theory.
Oh my god, are there people so young that they don't know what Roseanne is? Oh, anyway, Mickey being revealed as the killer is pretty obvious because he's in the beginning of the movie, then he kind of disappears for the middle, and then he shows up again at the end. By process of elimination, you can figure out that he's the killer. Oliphant has these shifty, crazy eyes. Viewers of The Simpsons know if he's got shifty eyes, that's how the audience knows he's evil. The Mrs. Loomis reveal is pretty effective. Metcalf plays crazy well. You like the face-off in the theater room. That theater is prominently featured in an earlier scene. There's David Warner's cameo as the drama teacher. Either way, it's a pretty well-executed moment. Gail and Randy and her new cameraman are on the college campus, and they get a call from the killer. Randy stays on the phone, and Gail's running around the campus grabbing everybody who has a cell phone. I'm a big enough of a nerd when Randy is on the phone with the killer. He very quickly lists a number of college-themed slasher films, and good for Kevin Williamson for digging a little deeper this time. House on Sorority Row, Splatter University, Final Exam, even drops that one in. That one is super obscure. The Dorm That Dripped Blood, etc.
Randy's a horror nerd.
He would know these
film
things.
class. He should know those things.
I am sad to see Randy go. His death is pretty awesome when you have the blood oozing oozing out of the van.
My God, how many times did Ghostface stab this guy?
He gets the shit stabbed out of him. A large portion of the second half of the film is set in the film department there at the college where Gale and Dewey are being stalked by the killer. Very effective moment. Gale's just avoiding being detected by Ghostface, barely stepping out of his view. Gale's on one side, Dewey's on the other. Ghostface approaches him, but because of the soundproof glass, she can't tell him that. And even though he gets stabbed, he still lives. Nothing can kill this guy, apparently.
Because he had scar tissue.
Meanwhile, Sydney and her friends are being protected by these cops and being driven around campus. Ghostface routinely gets the shit kicked out of him by 90-pound teenage girls, and yet he's fully capable of taking down 2 full-grown men, 2 full-grown cops.
It's because he underestimates the women?
Maybe.
Sure, if you want to give Williamson enough credit.
Or maybe it's because this was a quickie sequel that was pumped out within a year. I do really like the sequence where the cop is on the hood of the car and Ghostface is driving and he crashes it. The steel post, cop gets one through the back of the head and out the eyeball.
Talk about an effective scene. Sydney has to crawl across Ghostface to get out of the car.
That is a moment of protracted tension for certain. I don't think it's as scary as the filmmakers hoped it is. It's still pretty effective. Ends in a pretty disappointing way. They both get out of the car. She turns back and Ghostface is gone. Her friend gets it. I'm pretty sure the audience saw that one coming.
Even me at 9 years old, I was like, yeah, he's still coming behind somebody and get him.
I mentioned earlier where Randy is in film class and so is Mickey. They have a discussion about violence in the media and they talk about sequels. I thought of you when I was watching this, JD, when he says, sequels that are better than the original. Aliens. Doesn't count. Just as good as the original. Godfather Part 2. Different case. House 2, the second story.
House 2, the second story was better than the
original. It is! I don't know how far apart this was from the O.J. Simpson trial, but I think that was definitely on the screenwriter's mind.
I think it came out right after.
What is Mickey's motivation? Like Billy, he wants to get caught.
It'll be the trial of the century.
Yeah, he wants the O.J. trial. He wants the media circus. He wants to get famous. I do generally like the scene with the reveal of the killer and Jerry O'Connell getting shot. Don't like the way it pays off, where Sidney defeats Mrs. Loomis with the prop department. I thought that was kind of cheesy.
But I mean, that kind of plays into Wes's whole booby trap thing.
I guess that's
a little bit. I mean, it's not really something that she set up.
Scream 2. I don't want to say I like the movie more than the first one, but I don't think it's quite as good. It is a little more fun and a little more innovative and almost smarter than the first one.
Almost.
Almost.
The way I would order the movies would be 1, 2, 4, 3. Not as good as the first one, because the first one did it first. 2 is a really strong sequel. It's one of the strongest horror sequels we've gotten. It rips off the first one a little bit too much.
What do you know about trilogies?
All I know about movie trilogies is that in the third one, all bets are off.
Hello, Sydney. Welcome to the final act.
Part 2, obviously big hit. The Weinsteins immediately wanted a Scream 3, and nobody wanted to do it. Wes Craven said, I'm only making Scream 3 if you finance my vanity project about school teacher teaching kids in the ghetto how to play violin. Kevin Williamson, meanwhile, was too busy gifting the world with that unique classic of cinema, Teaching Mrs. Tingle. Meanwhile, Neve Campbell made her disinterest in the project pretty well known. Scream 3 was a movie that was forced into existence by studio pandering, which is pretty obvious, as it's not that good of a film. You would say this is the weakest in the series.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely the weakest.
Oh boy, is it ever.
Number one, it's too many storylines going, too many characters to develop. The actor doubles of each character.
Cannon fodder is all they are.
Yeah, basically up the kill count in the movie.
The opening of Scream 1 and Scream 2, very memorable. Do you remember the opening from Scream 3? That's what I thought.
Hold on. Give me a second. I will remember this. Hold on. It's there. Give me a minute. Oh, I got it. It's Cotton Weary and his girlfriend.
Yes.
Oh, what's her name? Is it Lena?
She's not important. It gives you a pretty good idea of how unmemorable this film is compared to the first two. Action shifts to Hollywood, which I guess was inevitable, though. It makes me miss Woodsboro. Cotton Weary, despite being an ex-con, has a talk show somehow. He's in traffic, gets a phone call from Ghostface. Oh no, your girlfriend's in peril. We know nothing about her. There's no reason to care about Cotton Weary's girlfriend. The lame jump scares in this movie start almost immediately, because when she's in the house, Ghostface jumps up and, ooh, big scary music, ooh. It's as if the people who made the movie gave so little of a shit that said, yeah, just throw the killer out there. That's enough to get people to scream. And maybe it is, but not me.
It really messes with character development from Scream 2 as far as Lee and Gale Weathers. I really hate that they're broken apart at the beginning of the third movie.
I dislike that immensely.
You know, if she's so much in love with him at the end of the second film that she is willing to forget the story, why would they break apart?
They try to lampshade that by Gale saying, there's more in life then etc., completely undoing the character development from the end of the last one. Yeah, I agree. That's sloppy. I dislike that. And it's even worse because Dewey is now dating the double fake meta Gale, who is really annoying. What is Sydney doing at the beginning of this movie?
She is a phone therapist.
She's living alone, completely isolated from her friends and family.
Which is stupid. Why would she do that?
Nev Campbell didn't want to do the movie. She had prior commitments. This upload is such an obvious attempt to remove her from the movie. I checked the time. 50 minutes, nearly halfway through a 2-hour-long movie, is when Sydney first interacts with the other characters in the film. The last act, Dewey and Gale and the other new characters are investigating the murder, being picked off one by one, and where is Sid? Sitting on her ass in a police station.
Right.
The only really decent scene involving Nev, the moment where she goes on set for Stab 3, Return to Woodsboro, and she steps into the replica of her house, and she's being chased through the house by the killer, and there's that admittedly cool moment where she opens a door, and it just opens up into air. Only legitimately interesting chase scene in the film. Gale and Dewey become the de facto protagonists because Nev is so blatantly disinterested. As their character development undone, but they seem to become dumber because they know at this point that there's a killer out there with a perfect voice changer. By the way, I don't like that. I don't like that the Ghostface voice changer has different settings now. But anyway, they know this, and they still take an anonymous tip from the phone from somebody who sounds like Sydney. And then the new characters in this film. Anything to note about the new characters?
They're all really annoying. And really obvious.
Guy playing the fake Dewey, the actor Matt Keslar, who would later do the TV show The Middleman, which I'm actually a big fan of, and he's so charming on that show, which is weird because he is so annoying in this. He's like a collection of stale, arrogant actor cliches.
I will tell you one part that I kind of like in this film, but it's also really stupid.
Okay.
But I guess I kind of like it because it is so stupid.
Okay.
The crypt facts part.
Oh no, it's bad.
Almost so bad it's entertaining. How did the killer know that he was going to light a lighter to read the script?
Did the killer account could have had, instead of a cigarette lighter, just a little flashlight on his keychain or some shit? Emily Mortimer is playing the new Sydney, and that she's not really all that important, and at first she seems kind of cute, innocent, and interesting, and then at the last act...
I think they introduced her as the red herring.
Blatantly.
Scream 3.
Yeah, and then you find out that she's just as hollow as everybody else. And there's the two detectives, and at one point Sydney is talking to the
one of which is played by Patrick Dempsey.
That's true. At one point Sydney's talking to Patrick Dempsey, and she asks him, "What's your favorite scary movie?" And he says, "My life." And then what does Sydney say? "Me too." This is the point where Scream 3 disappears up its own ass.
Like...
As bad as all those people are, they're not the worst new characters in the film. That dishonor is held for Candy, Jenny McCarthy's character.
It's okay, they kill it off early.
See, this is the difference between 2 and 3. In 2, you meet characters who die very soon afterwards, but they're immediately likable. In 3, you are introduced to these new characters, and you just can't wait to see them die because they're so annoying. Did
Williams even write this one?
No, he did not. It was written by Erin Kruger, who later gifted the world with Transformers 2 and 3, and we all know how I feel about those movies.
Yes, we do.
And as much as I dislike that stuff, you know what I really, really hate about Scream 3?
What?
Ghost Mom.
Ghost Marine.
Part 3 returns to humping Mrs. Prescott's corpse. Poor Maureen Prescott. What was with that scene where Sydney has a nightmare about her mom's ghost tapping on the window?
Listen to your mother, dear.
When the killer's motive is revealed, every event that has ever happened in the history of the Scream franchise is rooted back to Sydney's slutty mom. Billy didn't kill Sydney's mom. Roman, Sydney's previously unmentioned half-brother, is responsible. Maureen went to Hollywood to become an actress, met this asshole producer played by Lance Hankerson, who...
I noticed that her actress name in Hollywood was Rena Reynolds.
Thank you. It's so heavy-handed, just let her. It's trying to strong-arm a mythology out of thin gruel. That's what it's doing.
Very lazily put together. Very lazy film.
Agreed. Despite dying in part 2, Randy makes a sudden reappearance.
Yeah.
Gotta get another Randy speech in the movie. How did he know he was gonna die at that point? Because he lost his virginity? I mean, is the character really that self-aware? By the way, Heather Mazzarato has cameo as Randy's previously unmentioned sister.
Marnie's her name.
Fuck you. Carrie Fisher and Jay and Silent Bob, in character as Jay and Silent Bob, have cameos in the movie. It's trying too hard to be funny and clever. Is there anything we like about the movie, JD?
No.
Kari Lasak is set in this old Hollywood mansion. Feels like the film is trying to intentionally recall 1930s old dark house movies or 50s AIP films. Maybe it's going a little deeper into the history of horror there. Maybe. I really hate Roman. Worst killer in the series. I like Roger Corman's cameo. I like Lance Hankerson's cameo. Patrick Warburton has a small role. Very funny because it's Patrick Warburton.
The killer can't take down Patrick Warburton. Put over the head with an iron skillet.
I like the frying pan. One really, really neat shot. The killer throws the knife and you get a spinning knife-o vision.
There's two things that I like about it. The first thing is Patrick Warburton's final line, "Dude, drop."
Good example of a character that would be annoying if it was played by any other actor.
Yes. The end, when the two Gales are running around the mansion together and they see the one guy get killed and they look down, they look at each other, they look down, look at each other and scream and run.
Actually, I don't like that, because I don't like them turning Gail into a whimpering, screaming victim when she's been so strong in the previous movies.
I don't like it because of that, but I do like it because
It's a funny moment.
it's the only legitimate funny moment in the film.
Yeah, this one's definitely short on humor. The movie ends with the shot. Sydney turns to her door, and she's about to turn the security system on, but she stops, and she leaves the back door open because now she feels safe. Because it's over, guys! Except it's totally not, because they made a new one in 2011.
Oh, snap!
Scream 3 was supposed to be the last one in the series. Randy says as such. If you're dealing with another sequel, the rules are the same, but if you're dealing with the end of a trilogy, the rules are different.
Robert's residence.
Welcome home, Sydney. You're a survivor, aren't you, Sydney? What good's it to be a survivor if everyone close to you is dead? You can't save them. All you can do is watch.
A lot of things happened off screen. Nev Campbell, Courtney Cox's, David Arquette's career did not exactly sail into the stratosphere. Perhaps more importantly, the Weinstein brothers left Miramax, took Dimensions with them, and they hadn't had a hit in a couple of years, so they decided, well, what we should do is revive one of our big hits from back in the day. Thus, Scream 4 was very quickly greenlit. Scream 4 probably seemed like an attractive option to just about everybody involved. What were your thoughts on Scream 4? This was the big horror release of 2011, more or less.
I liked it overall. There were some issues.
My biggest problem with Scream 4, now granted I have not seen the movie since it was first released, so these thoughts might be a little rusty. The franchise hasn't changed any. Horror changed in the 11 years between sequels. Blair Witch came and introduced found footage. Sixth Sense came and revived the ghost genre. Saw and torture porn and paranormal activity and found footage and The Ring and J-horror. All these huge trends and movements in the horror genre within that 10 years, and Scream 4 barely comments on any of it.
What has some found footage? Big plot device in the...
Well, sort of. Mostly they're talking about reboots and remakes, which I guess makes sense considering this is itself a reboot. A little disappointed that in the universe of Scream, the horror landscape hasn't changed in. Apparently, postmodern, self-referential slasher films never went out of fashion in that universe. We're on, what is it, Stab 7? That opening.
It's really long.
It's really long, but it's okay. I guess Ghostface sending threatening messages over text messages. The screenplay acknowledges that that's a stupid idea. Because it's not in the actual movie, it's in the fake movie within the movie. There are triple layers. Christian Bell and Anna Paquin doing our by now required opening special guest victims.
It goes into the actual opening kill of the movie.
Which I don't even remember. I guess my biggest disappointment with Scream 4 is that for a series that had always worked very hard to be on the cutting edge of the horror genre, and pun intended, it's a little disappointing that it isn't more in the know.
I agree, but I think it does it ironically, almost.
It's being ironically old-fashioned?
Yes.
Well, it does seem to imply that the new generation ain't no good.
They talk about how they don't like Saul because all that is torture porn.
Yeah, they do drop that line. Eric Knudson's character, who's the new Randy, who's the leader of the high school film club, and he uploads everything he does every waking hour of his day up to YouTube. He has a camera on him at all times, and there is a scene where Ghostface is stalking him as he's recording. Another thing that really disappointed about this movie, all of the returning people survive. Sydney survives, Dewey survives, Gale survives. I feel like if you're bringing the franchise back and this is supposed to be its big sequel, you gotta raise the stakes a little bit. Gotta kill somebody, but nope, every single person makes it out alive.
They do some things right.
Like what?
They keep the relationship between Dewey and Gale.
Now the situation's been switched, and he's the successful one, and she's the one that's on the back burner.
And as far as the actual loving relationship between them, they keep that going.
It's interesting to note that David Arquette and Courtney Cox were divorced not a year after this movie came out, though. You're almost searching for the movie for hints that their relationship was breaking up.
Pretty evident.
What do you think of the new characters in this film?
I like some of them, don't really like some of them.
You were the big Hayden Panettiere fan going into this.
Hayden Panettiere should play Supergirl, I don't care what Zach says.
She'd be okay. I watched the first season of Heroes. She's okay. I was never really super impressed with her. But she's actually pretty likable in this movie. Kirby is her character. She's a female horror nerd. Is that blatant pandering to the fans in the audience? I don't know if it is.
It doesn't exist, that's for sure.
It does exist. I don't know if it's blatant pandering on writer's part or if he is commenting on the fact that you see a lot of women into horror these days. It's pretty common.
Yeah, but none of them are as hot as Hayden.
Very few people in real life are as hot as Hollywood actors. Rory Culkin, Macaulay's more talented younger brother, is in it. Emma Roberts, Julia Roberts' niece. That casting was an intentional double meta subversion. Spoiler alert for a 2-year-old movie. Her character is ultimately revealed to be the killer. And why is she killing people?
Because she wants to be famous.
Because she wants to be famous. She wants to be a reality show star. Literally killing to climb her way up the celebrity ladder, and meanwhile the actress is played by the niece of a much more famous person. I don't know if that was intentional or not. But her performance is a little flat. She's set up to be the new Sydney until the reveal. It isn't really until then that Robert starts to do anything as a performance.
Where she's revealed and she's throwing herself to the table and...
That's funny. If the movie had ended on that shot where she's being wheeled on the gurney into the ambulance with all the camera lights, if the film had cut to black, the end, the movie would have been improved 20 points. That last act in the hospital is so extraneous, so unneeded. If it had ended on that mark, people would have said that Scream 4 is daring and does something different instead of same old, same old.
You're still going to kill the main character.
Emma Roberts' character he is supposed to be the dark mirror universe version of Sydney. Is that last shot after she gets killed where the two are facing each other? Maybe, I don't know. Or maybe Kevin Williamson is saying, oh, this new generation ain't no good, and this generation, Sydney would be the bad guy. I don't know. This film does up the gore, at the very least.
Yeah.
Compared to the previous two sequels, the gore level is definitely much higher. The kill I really remember, one cop getting full speed, battering ram, stab in the forehead, knife buried up to the hilt. Would a teenage girl really have the strength to do that? Anyway. There's a decent stalk through a parking garage featuring Alison Brie, whom I generally like. There's a decent sequence set in Barn House where I believe the high school students are having a stab marathon.
Yes.
But the killer's actually in the house. Overall, the movie actually did have a pretty decent sense of whodunit. It did keep you guessing.
Did it get you, or?
The movie isn't scary at all.
I don't mean scary. I mean, did you figure out?
It did keep me guessing a couple of times. I still figured it out before the end. The scene where Rory Culkin is taped to the chair. By the way, the horror trivia quiz comes back strong in this one.
Yes.
That is prominently featured. I was surprised that Hayden Panettiere got it. Supposedly. I mean, her fate is kind of left up in the air. We don't see her again, so I guess she's dead.
She gets stabbed, you see blood fly up on the window.
When Rory Culkin was in the chair and had his mouth and his arms hidden, I knew that he had, like, Bluetooth or something on.
Here's the thought. For the reboot, shouldn't it have been 3 killers? We would have been trying to figure out who the 2 killers were, and then, BAM!
One more! If I had written Scream 4, I would comment more on it, what the horror genre is today, as opposed to what it was in 1996.
I maintain that it was an ironic choice.
Well, either way, it didn't resonate with the public. Scream 4 was supposed to be the start of a new trilogy. It didn't exactly bomb, but it wasn't the huge hit the Weinsteins were hoping for. And as of now, no new sequels are forthcoming. Maybe they'll wait another 10 years for the 20th anniversary, do another one. What do you think a potential Scream 5 continuing from Part 4 would have been like?
Scream 2?
Sydney and Dewey and Gale's storyline was kind of over. I don't really know if they could have squeezed another 2 films out of it.
But if that killer would have won...
Would have been a great setup for a sequel, but they didn't do that.
But how would you have continued that story?
Well, that would have been really interesting, because now you've got a Scream series where the killer is the main character. And you could do a Scream movie from the inside out.
Maybe.
That would have been cool.
Maybe Pinhead and Michael Myers come into play.
Maybe so. This is not quite the end of the franchise. Right now, MTV has a Scream TV show in development.
Okay, well, that could be promising.
I just don't know how you would do it weekly. Obviously, in genre television right now, serialization is the big thing, so you would drag a mystery out for 12 or 24 episodes?
Teen Wolf runs 12 episodes a season.
Okay. There's very little information on the Scream TV show, even though if you look at the IMDb right now, Wes Craven is still attached to direct the pilot. There's been no confirmation on that. Apparently, they've gotten some writers who have written stuff for NCIS. Procedural cop shows like that. And is that the direction a Scream television series is going to go in? I really don't think Scream is a great movie to turn into a TV series. The only way to do it is there would be one mystery set up over a season. I don't know. Horror television's big right now with Hannibal and Bates Motel and Walking Dead. I don't know about Scream the TV show.
If it was done right, it could work.
Hey, anything could work if it's done right.
Maybe half of it's done from the killer's point of view when he's stalking his prey. And
where does this follow? Does this pick up after Scream 4? Does this follow a completely new group of characters that are in the same universe? Do we have television versions of Sydney and Gale and etc.?
None of them really do anything. Why can't we have...
No, there's no way that the actual actors would be involved with this. They're out of the show's pay grade. We're not going to see Neve Campbell in this. Like all these things, I'll check it out when it premieres, but there's no guarantee I'll watch anything more than the first episode. Bates Motel didn't pass the first episode test, and who's to say Scream will?
You can't really go by the first episode, though.
There are only so many hours in my life. Is there anything more to say about the Scream franchise? The Scream Tetralogy? I hope that side was picked up.
You and that tetralogy word, it doesn't flow like quadrilogy.
Quadrilogy's a fucked up made up word.
But it flows better.
If you want to contact the Bangers and Mash Show, please do. We're lonely. Our email address is bangersandmash88. That's bangers, the letter N, the word mash, the number 88 at yahoo.com. We have a Facebook page. As of today, August 20th, the verdict is still out on the Wiener Skull. Hey, here's a thought. If you want to design a new Facebook icon for us, please do. Send it to us. We would love that.
I'm Mr. Mash.
I'm Mr. Bangers.
I guess the only way to end the show is... How do you want to die tonight, Zach?
Helicopter crash.
Well, too bad you're getting a knife in the throat.
By the way, Norman Bates totally did have a motive.
I got one. Here it goes, right? I'm gonna slash and gash, cut another hole in your ass. I spill blood on the walls and play tennis with your balls. If the phone rings, don't answer the call. Gonna slit your throat, fuck you like a goat, peel your foreskin off and make a winter coat. Peace.
You
was the illest rhyme I ever